Yeah.
Wow, that would be amazing if it were true.
It's almost like Alex has an agenda and he's trying to hide that information from you. My friend's wife needed eye surgery. Nothing major, pretty routine. Now she knew her husband was a genuinely good guy, but extraordinarily forgetful. She reminded him countless times days before, pick me up 3 hours later at 3 p.m. She's waiting for her husband, 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. He doesn't show up. What an a-hole. Did Alex O'Connor really give Wes Huff the fact check that you might think at first glance? Well, no, actually. In fact, he kind of lowered his standards for this response, and you're about to see why.
How similar is it to the book of Isaiah that's in the Bible?
So that one is fascinating. So this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but when we discovered the Great Isaiah Scroll, previous to that, the earliest copy of Isaiah that we had was in the Masoretic text, which is in the Middle Ages.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was literally 1,000 years. We literally pushed back our understanding of Isaiah 1,000 years. And the thing that really shocked scholars, like I said, this isn't true for all of the Dead Sea Scrolls, but one of the things that shocked them about Isaiah was that it was word for word identical to the Masoretic text.
Word for word.
Word for word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that would be amazing if it were true. In fact, the Dead Sea version of the Isaiah scroll is not quite identical to the Masoretic text, that is, the one that we know from the Bible. Can you guess how many textual variants there are between the two? Take a guess. 1 that Wes forgot about? 10? 100? Try more than 2,600. Now, most of these variants are small. They're differences in spelling, for example, but some of them are more significant. For instance, in Isaiah chapter 2, the end of verse 9 and all of verse 10 are simply missing from the Dead Sea version.
Okay, I'm glad he pointed out that there were minor variants in spelling, and sometimes it's not as if it's a spelling mistake, just a different way of spelling a certain word, like those crazy Canucks like to add a U to every word that has an O in it. Also, the Great Isaiah scroll is the only one they are mentioning, which is the full book of Isaiah. But there were several other scrolls of Isaiah included with those Dead Sea Scrolls, and they contain less textual variants with numbers much lower than 2,600. Oh, and also, the other scrolls of Isaiah that were found, they do include the full verse 9 and verse 10 that Alex says are not present. It's almost like Alex has an agenda and he's trying to hide that information from you. So why would Alex leave that information out? I mean, it's completely relevant to the task at hand, which is making an informed decision. It's like he wants you to make a decision without being fully informed. Think about this situation. My friend's wife needed eye surgery. Nothing major, pretty routine. She was to be dropped off at the doctor and then 3 hours later picked up by her husband. Now she knew her husband was a genuinely good guy, but extraordinarily forgetful. She reminded him countless times days before, pick me up 3 hours later at 3 p.m. Well, she goes in for the eye surgery. Everything goes fine, except she can't drive. She can't see. She's waiting for her husband. 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m. He doesn't show up, and she reminded him countless times, but he still forgot. What an a-hole. Except, here's the full story. On the way to go get her, he slipped on the ice and broke his leg. He's now actually at the hospital a few blocks away. That seems like relevant information, does it not? I mean, when you factor that in, it makes it seem like it's not really the husband who's being a jerk at all. It's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. Those details matter when forming an opinion. If you didn't have all those details, your opinion would probably be, rightfully so, that the husband is a jerk. But with all those details, you can form a more accurate opinion. Knowing that should really completely change your perspective of the husband, and you see those details matter. And if you don't know all the details, you're not going to have an accurate picture in mind. And Alex is incredibly smart, like intimidatingly smart. He knows those details, and I don't know why he didn't make them well known in his response.
First, Wes says that Jesus was audaciously going around claiming to be God himself. I don't think that's true. Nowhere in Mark, Matthew, or Luke does Jesus actually claim to be God in his own words.
False. Just totally false. Jesus didn't claim to be God in your own words, Alex, or at least the words you would have preferred he used. That's like somebody saying, I apologize, and you going, well, they didn't say they're sorry. it's really ridiculous. Jesus absolutely did claim to be God. We have to remember the context of the situation. These Gospels were likely written with a very Jewish crowd in mind. If you read Matthew, Mark, and Luke in the mindset of a Jew at the time, the claims of Christ's deity would jump off the page at you. He receives worship countless times. In Mark, Jesus claims to be able to forgive sins. Meanwhile, it's pointed out just a little bit earlier in the book that only God can do that. And there are many other things. If you're a Jew at this time, it's likely so apparent to you that this man is claiming to be God. Alex then goes on to point out that it's only in the latest book, the most recent book of John, where we get more overt claims of Christ's deity. And Alex says this.
Don't you think it's a bit suspicious that these claims only show up in our latest gospel? If Jesus was known to be walking around claiming explicitly to be God himself, did the other 3 gospel authors just not think this was relevant? A minor, unimportant detail not worth including?
No, I don't actually think that's suspicious at all. I think, as I just outlined, it was obvious to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and especially to their readers. And it's entirely likely that as Christianity was spreading, that John saw Christianity become more popular among Gentiles and that John was writing to a more Gentile crowd. It is a later written gospel, so perhaps John saw a gap that needed to be filled in communicating with the Gentiles, so he recounted Jesus' life in a way that focused a bit more on his divinity. I don't know why it's so ridiculous to think that that might be the case. That seems perfectly logical to me.
How many people saw his body, right?
Well, Paul says that 400 people saw him all at once.
400 people saw the crucifixion?
No, saw the resurrected
resurrection.
Jesus. Yeah, 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says that Jesus appeared to the disciples, and then he appeared to 400 people all at once.
Wes gets this slightly wrong, as Paul actually says that Jesus appeared to 500, not 400 people at one time. But this only makes it all the more amazing. 500 people witnessing the physically resurrected Jesus would be an amazing proof of his resurrection. Unfortunately, 1 Corinthians chapter 15 is the only mention we have of this event anywhere. It's not in the Gospels, nor in Acts, nor in any other historical source. So, what do we learn about this event from 1 Corinthians? Nothing. Nothing at all.
There's about 3 or 4 other things that Alex says in his rebuttal that I wouldn't mind covering, but it would make this video extraordinarily long, and I really wanted to focus on this point because it's a big one. I actually can't believe the lack of critical thinking that Alex uses here. Like, to say that we can't know anything from the claim of 1 Corinthians is absolutely ridiculous. Yes, it is nice when multiple sources claim the same event in a historical setting. It helps us to confirm that this event, whatever it is, actually happened. That's one of the reasons we can know for sure that Jesus died on the cross. Of all the events of his life recorded in multiple different areas, this one was the most documented. We can be sure that Jesus died on the cross. I say this because this is actually something that the Quran takes issue with. It denies that Jesus died on the cross, the most documented moment of his life, and the Quran denies that it happened. Anyway, that's another tangent for another time. But while it is nice to have big events documented in multiple different sources, it does not mean that the event didn't happen if it was only recorded in one source. Never do historians ever say, oh, well, this event was only recorded in this one document, so we can't take it seriously. So why Alex says that, I'm really just not sure. Because truly, and Alex is a smart person, so I don't say this lightly, but what he said there was rather a stupid thing to say. There are many historical events that we take as truly happening, even if they were only recorded in one single place. In this case, we just have to look at what other evidence we have that the claim is credible. And here we have Paul, the main writer of the New Testament and someone who is a reliable person as far as textual criticism goes, make this claim. If it was some other author that we knew nothing about, yeah, for sure, we should take this claim worth a grain of salt. But this is Paul, the guy who wrote most of the New Testament, and all the other things that he writes are really, really reliable. I dare say no other author of the New Testament is as reliable as Paul. Also, many other authors do corroborate appearances of the risen Jesus, and in the passage in question, Paul lists the names of well-known people whom Jesus appeared to. And of those 500, Paul says that some have fallen asleep, but others are still with us, implying that Paul actually knows these people. The fact that he lists specific names and then says that some of the 500 are still here is in many ways a live fact check. Because he's writing this while these people are still alive, any one of them could have said, yeah, Paul is lying about that, that didn't happen to me. And many historians would argue that the mention of some of the 500 still being alive is basically Paul saying, go and ask some of them yourself, because they are still here. Never in any other writing from antiquity that I am aware of do we get an author basically saying, go ask these people and see if I am lying. Would it have been nice to have this event recorded in another source? Yeah, for sure, it definitely would have been, but still there's other evidence showing us that this claim is reliable. A lot of evidence, to be exact, so for Alex to say that we can't know anything of this claim is truly just ridiculous. I don't think I've ever seen Alex take this skeptical of an approach to any other historical writing where an event was only written down in one place, so why does he do that here? Alex is smart, like scary smart. So why this fairly weak rebuttal came from him, I don't know. I might be reading into things, I'm no psychologist, but it almost seems like the response from Alex was panicked and rushed. He also makes it seem like Wes was just saying outlandish things, and the fact is that while there is some professional debate to the things that Wes said, the counter arguments don't differ much from what he relayed on Joe's podcast. And the vast majority of what Wes said, most scholars agree with. Just not Alex for some reason.